The leather stank worse than death itself. But Emma Anderson had long stopped noticing it as she worked the fresh hide stretched across the wooden frame in the yard behind her uncle's tannery in Jefferson, Texas, where the summer heat of 1877 made everything shimmer like a mirage. Her arms ached from scraping away the remaining flesh and fat, her dress stained beyond recognition, her hands raw despite the thick gloves she wore, but she moved with practiced efficiency that came from 2 years of this grueling work. The other young women in town would be at the social gathering today, laughing behind their fans and hoping to catch the eye of some eligible bachelor. But Emma had stopped receiving invitations months ago, when the smell of her work became too deeply ingrained in her skin and clothes to wash away completely. Her uncle Theodore had taken her in after her parents died from fever during their wagon journey west, and she owed him everything, even if it meant becoming a social pariah in a town where a woman's reputation and marriage prospects meant more than gold. The work was honest, and the tannery provided leather goods that every rancher and cowboy needed. But polite society did not care about necessity when confronted with the reality of how their boots and saddles came to be. Emma had learned to hold her head high when women crossed the street to avoid her, when shopkeepers served her quickly and with barely concealed disgust, when even the church ladies whispered that no decent man would ever want a girl who smelled of death and chemicals. She was scraping a particularly stubborn section when she heard the gate creak open and looked up to see a tall cowboy leading his horse into the yard, his hat pulled low against the afternoon sun. He was broad-shouldered and moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin, dust covering his clothes from long days on the trail. Emma straightened, wiping her forehead with the back of her arm, knowing she probably looked as rough as she felt but past caring about such things anymore. "Help you," she called out, her voice steady despite the way her heart unexpectedly quickened at the sight of him. The cowboy stopped and looked directly at her, and she steeled herself for the usual reaction, the subtle recoil or the quick averting of eyes that most people displayed when they realized what she did for a living. Instead, he tipped his hat politely and walked closer, his expression open and curious rather than disgusted. "Name is Owen Wright," he said, his voice deep and warm. "I work at the Double R Ranch about 10 miles north. Got a saddle needs repair, and my boss said your uncle does the best leather work in 3 counties. Emma nodded, setting down her scraping tool and wiping her hands on her already filthy apron. "He does. Uncle Theodore is inside the workshop. I can take you to him." Owen glanced at the hide she had been working, then back at her face with genuine interest. "You do the tanning yourself?" "Yes," she said shortly, waiting for the judgment that always followed such revelations. "Must be hard work," Owen said, surprising her. "I helped at a tannery once when I was younger, back in Missouri before I came west. Never met anyone who stuck with it long unless they had real dedication. The smell alone drove most folks away within a week." Emma blinked, caught off guard by his matter-of-fact tone that held no disgust or condescension. "It is hard work, but it is honest. The best kind," Owen agreed, and something in his smile made warmth spread through her chest in a way she had not felt in months, maybe years. She led him through the yard toward the workshop, acutely aware of how she must look and smell, but Owen walked beside her without any sign of discomfort. Her uncle was bent over a workbench when they entered, his weathered hands carefully stitching a bridle with the precision that had made him the most sought-after leather worker in this part of Texas. "Uncle Theodore, this is Owen Wright from the Double R Ranch. He has a saddle that needs repair." Theodore looked up, his sharp eyes assessing Owen quickly before nodding. "Let me see it." Owen brought in his saddle from where he had left it on his horse, and Emma watched as her uncle examined it with practiced hands. The leather was quality work but had cracked along one side from hard use, and the stirrup needed replacing. "Can fix this," Theodore said. "Need 3 days, maybe 4. "That would be fine, sir," Owen replied. "What do I owe you?" They discussed price while Emma stood to the side, trying not to stare at the cowboy but finding her gaze drawn back to him repeatedly. There was something different about him, something in the way he carried himself that spoke of quiet strength and genuine kindness. When the business was concluded and Owen prepared to leave, he turned to Emma again. "Miss Anderson, thank you for showing me in." "Just Emma," she said, then immediately wondered why she had offered such familiarity to a stranger. "Emma, then," Owen repeated, and her name sounded different in his voice, somehow softer and more significant. "I will be back in 3 days." After he left, Emma returned to her work, but her mind kept drifting back to the encounter. She told herself she was being foolish, that one polite conversation did not mean anything, that a man like Owen Wright probably had his pick of pretty girls who did not spend their days elbow-deep in animal hides and harsh chemicals. But still, she could not shake the memory of his smile or the genuine interest in his eyes when he had asked about her work. The next morning, Emma woke before dawn as always and began the day's labor. She had several hides in various stages of the tanning process, and each required specific attention. The newest ones needed to be fleshed and cleaned, soaking in a mixture of water and lime to help remove the hair. Others were ready for the baiting process, where she would work them with a dull knife to soften the leather. The most advanced were being treated with tannin from oak bark, a process that would take weeks to complete properly, but resulted in the strong, supple leather that made her uncle's work so prized. She was bent over a soaking vat when she heard voices from the front of the property. Emma paid little attention at first, assuming it was just another customer, until she recognized one voice as belonging to Margaret Halstead, the banker's daughter who had once been something close to a friend before Emma started working at the tannery. "I do not care how good the work is, Mother," Margaret was saying, her voice carrying clearly across the yard. "I refuse to touch anything that girl has handled. The very thought makes my stomach turn." Emma froze, her hands still in the cold water, her chest tightening with familiar hurt that she thought she had grown immune to by now. "Now, Margaret," came the older woman's voice, "we must be Christian in our charity. The poor girl has no choice in her circumstances." "Charity," Margaret said with a laugh that held no humor. "There is charity and then there is common sense. No respectable woman would do such work. She could have found employment as a seamstress or a teacher, but instead she chooses to wallow in filth like an animal." Emma pulled her hands from the vat and stood slowly, anger and shame warring in her chest. She wanted to march around to the front and confront them, to explain that she had tried to find other work when she first came to town, but no one would hire the orphaned niece of a tanner with no references and limited skills. She wanted to tell them that her uncle had been the only one willing to take her in, that the work put food on the table and kept a roof over her head, that it was not wallowing in filth but honest labor that their husbands and sons depended on every single day. But she stayed where she was because experience had taught her that explaining would change nothing. People saw what they wanted to see, and they wanted to see her as something less than themselves, something they could look down upon to feel better about their own lives. Theodore emerged from the workshop and greeted the Halstead women with professional courtesy, taking their order for a new set of reins while Emma remained out of sight. After they left, Emma returned to her work with mechanical determination, pushing down the emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. This was her life, and she had accepted it. She did not need their approval or friendship. 3 days passed in the familiar rhythm of labor. Emma worked from dawn until dusk, her muscles burning and her mind blissfully empty as she focused on the physical tasks before her. Theodore was a man of few words, but he was kind in his own way, making sure she ate enough and never pushing her beyond what was reasonable, even if reasonable in the tanning business was already far beyond what most people could endure. On the afternoon of the third day, Emma was in the workshop helping her uncle finish Owen's saddle when she heard a horse approach. Her heart, traitor that it was, began beating faster even before Theodore said, "That will be the cowboy from the Double R." Emma told herself to stay in the workshop, to let her uncle handle the transaction, but her feet carried her to the doorway anyway. Owen was dismounting, and when he saw her, his face broke into a smile that made something flutter in her stomach. "Emma," he greeted her warmly. "Good to see you again." "Mr. Wright," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady and professional. "Owen, please," he said. "Mr. Wright makes me feel like my father." Theodore brought out the repaired saddle, and Owen examined it with obvious appreciation. "This is fine work, sir." "Better than new, I would say." "Good leather just needs proper care," Theodore said gruffly, but Emma could see the pleased glint in his eye at the compliment. Owen paid, then seemed to hesitate before turning to Emma. "I was wondering, Emma, if perhaps you might have time this Sunday to attend the church social with me." The question caught her so completely off guard that for a moment she could only stare at him. A church social? With her? The girl that everyone avoided like she carried the plague. She started, then stopped, not knowing how to explain all the reasons why that was a terrible idea without sounding pathetic. "I do not think that would be wise." "Why not?" Owen asked, his expression genuinely confused. Emma glanced at her uncle, who was watching them with interest, then back at Owen. "I am not exactly welcome at such gatherings. My work, it makes people uncomfortable." Owen's brow furrowed. "Your work makes you a valuable member of this community. Anyone who does not see that is a fool." "That may be," Emma said carefully, "but it does not change the reality of the situation. If you are seen with me, people will talk. It will reflect poorly on you." "Let them talk," Owen said with such simple conviction that Emma felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "Emma, I have been working cattle since I was 14 years old. I have slept on the hard ground in all weather, eaten dust for days on end during drives, and spent more time with cows than people. I know what hard, dirty work looks like, and I know it deserves respect, not scorn. Your work is no different." "The town does not see it that way," Emma said quietly. "Then the town needs to learn better," Owen replied. He took a step closer, his eyes searching her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Emma, I have been thinking about you since I was here 3 days ago. I have been hoping I might get the chance to know you better. Please, give me that chance." Emma felt her resolve crumbling in the face of his earnest request. It had been so long since anyone had looked at her the way Owen was looking at her now, like she was something precious rather than something to be avoided. It was terrifying and thrilling all at once. "All right," she heard herself say. "Sunday." Owen's smile could have lit up the entire state of Texas. "I will pick you up at 3 o'clock if that suits you." After he left, Emma stood in the yard feeling as if the world had tilted on its axis. Theodore came up beside her, his weathered hand settling briefly on her shoulder. "He is a good man," her uncle said simply. "Do not let fear keep you from happiness, child." Emma nodded, not trusting her voice to speak. That night, she lay in her narrow bed in the small room off the workshop and allowed herself to hope, just a little, that maybe her life could be more than endless work and social isolation. Sunday arrived with cloudless skies and temperatures that promised to be scorching by midday. Emma rose early and did her morning chores, then spent far longer than usual washing and preparing for the social. She had only 2 decent dresses, both of which she kept carefully preserved for church services, and she chose the blue one because it brought out the color of her eyes. No matter how much she scrubbed, she could not completely eliminate the smell of the tannery from her skin, but she did her best with the lavender soap she had been saving and hoped it would be enough. When Owen arrived precisely at 3 o'clock, Emma was waiting on the porch, her hands twisted nervously in her skirt. He was dressed in clean clothes, his hat in his hands, and when he saw her, his expression softened with something that looked like wonder. "You look beautiful," he said simply. Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Thank you. You look very nice yourself." The ride to the church was not long, but it gave them time to talk. Owen told her about his work at the Double R Ranch, how he had come west 5 years ago after his father died, and left him with nothing but debts in Missouri. He had worked his way from ranch hand to foreman through sheer determination and skill, and there was pride in his voice when he spoke of the cattle operation he helped manage. "What about you?" Owen asked. "How did you come to Jefferson?" Emma told him the story she had told very few people, about her parents' dream of starting fresh in Texas, about the fever that took them both within days of each other on the trail, about the way Theodore had appeared like an answer to prayer when she had been alone and terrified at 16 years old. "He gave me a home when I had nothing," Emma said quietly. "The work is hard, but I owe him everything." "You do not owe anyone your whole life, Emma," Owen said gently. "Gratitude is one thing, but you deserve to have dreams of your own too." "My dreams seem like foolish things now," Emma admitted. "I used to think I might become a teacher or maybe marry and have a family, but that life is not for someone like me anymore." "Why not?" Owen asked, and there was such genuine confusion in his voice that Emma almost laughed. "Because decent people do not want a tanner's niece at their dinner tables, Owen. They do not want their children taught by someone who smells of death, and they certainly do not want their sons courting such a woman." "Then they are fools," Owen said firmly. "And I am not most people, Emma." They arrived at the church to find the social already in full swing. Tables had been set up in the yard with food and lemonade, and people clustered in groups talking and laughing. Emma felt the weight of their stares the moment she and Owen walked through the gate together, saw the way conversations paused and heads turned, the way Margaret Halstead's mouth fell open in shock. Owen seemed oblivious to it all, keeping his hand lightly on Emma's elbow as he guided her toward the refreshment table. "Lemonade?" he asked pleasantly. "Yes, please," Emma managed, her stomach in knots. As Owen poured them drinks, Reverend Collins approached with his wife. Emma braced herself for a polite but firm suggestion that she leave, but instead the Reverend smiled warmly at her. "Miss Anderson, how lovely to see you here. We have missed you at services lately." Emma blinked in surprise. She still came to church most Sundays, but she sat in the back and left quickly afterward to avoid exactly the kind of confrontation she was anticipating now. "I have been here, Reverend," she said carefully. "Yes, well, I hope you will sit closer to the front next week," he said kindly. "And Mr. Wright, welcome. We are always glad to see new faces at our gatherings." The Reverend's acceptance seemed to give others permission to relax slightly, though Emma still felt the undercurrent of disapproval from many quarters. Owen remained by her side throughout the afternoon, seemingly impervious to the whispers and stares. He introduced her to some of his fellow ranch hands who had also come to the social, and they treated her with the same easy courtesy that Owen did. It was Margaret Halstead who finally confronted them directly. She approached with two other young women flanking her like soldiers, her pretty face set in lines of barely concealed outrage. "Mr. Wright," Margaret said sweetly, ignoring Emma entirely. "I do not believe we have been properly introduced. I am Margaret Halstead, and these are my friends Sarah and Catherine." "Madam," Owen said politely but without enthusiasm. "I was hoping you might tell us about your ranch work," Margaret continued, moving to position herself between Owen and Emma in a maneuver so obvious that Emma would have found it amusing if it did not make her feel so small. "It must be terribly exciting." "It is mostly hard work," Owen said, stepping deliberately around Margaret so that he was next to Emma again. "Much like what Emma does at her uncle's tannery." Margaret's smile faltered. "Oh, yes. Well, ranching is quite different from," she paused delicately, "that sort of work." "How so?" Owen asked, his tone deceptively mild. Margaret looked flustered. "Well, ranching is respectable work, noble even, whereas tanning is," she wrinkled her nose, "unpleasant. Tanning is what makes the saddles we ride, the boots we wear, and the belts that hold our guns," Owen said, his voice still calm but with an edge of steel underneath. "Without tanners, ranchers could not do their work. So it seems to me that tanning is just as noble and respectable as any other honest labor." Emma stared at him, her heart swelling with something that felt dangerously close to love. No one had ever defended her like this, had ever spoken up for her worth with such simple conviction. Margaret's face flushed red. "Well," she said stiffly, "I suppose some people have different standards than others." "Yes," Owen agreed. "Some people judge others by their character and hard work, others judge by less meaningful things. Now, if you will excuse us, I promised Emma a walk by the creek." He offered Emma his arm, and she took it gratefully, allowing him to guide her away from Margaret's shocked expression and the interested stares of the other townspeople. They walked in silence until they reached the creek that ran behind the church property, its water moving lazily in the summer heat. "I am sorry," Emma said finally. "I warned you this would happen." "You have nothing to apologize for," Owen said firmly. "That woman is a snob and she is not worth your concern." "She is the banker's daughter," Emma pointed out. "She has influence in this town." "Emma," Owen turned to face her, his hands settling gently on her shoulders. "Look at me." She met his eyes, seeing warmth and determination there that made her chest ache. "I do not care about her influence or her opinions," Owen said intently. "I care about you. I have spent 3 days barely able to think about anything except seeing you again. You are strong and capable and beautiful, and if the people in this town cannot see that, then they are blind fools who do not deserve your time or thoughts." "Owen," Emma whispered, overwhelmed by the intensity of his words. "I know this is fast," Owen continued. "I know we barely know each other. But Emma, I see you in a way I do not think many people do. I see someone who does what needs to be done without complaint, who works harder than most men I know, who has been kicked down by circumstance and society but still gets up every morning and faces the day with courage. That is the kind of person I want in my life. That is the kind of person I could build a future with." Emma felt tears prickling at her eyes. "You do not know what you are saying. If you court me openly, the town will make your life difficult. You will lose business, lose respect." "Then I will lose those things," Owen said simply. "Emma, I grew up with nothing. I have built myself up from scratch once before, and I can do it again if I have to. What I cannot do is walk away from you and spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been if I had just been brave enough to reach for what I wanted." "What if I am not worth all that sacrifice?" Emma asked, her voice breaking slightly. "You are worth everything," Owen said, and then he was leaning down and his lips were on hers, gentle and warm and full of promise. Emma had been kissed before, quick stolen moments with a boy back before her life fell apart, but this was different. This was Owen pouring everything he had said and more into a single perfect moment. And Emma felt something unlock in her chest that she had kept carefully guarded for so long. She kissed him back with all the longing and hope she had been afraid to feel, her hands coming up to rest against his chest where she could feel his heart beating as fast as her own. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Owen rested his forehead against hers and smiled. "So is that a yes to courting?" Emma laughed, the sound surprising her with its genuine joy. "Yes, you impossible man. That is a yes." They spent the rest of the afternoon by the creek, talking about everything and nothing, learning each other's stories and dreams. Owen told her about his mother, who had died when he was young, and his father, who had been a good man but a poor businessman, leaving Owen with debts that took years to pay off. Emma told him about her childhood, about the parents she still missed every day, about the dreams she had put away but maybe could dare to resurrect now. When Owen took her home that evening, Theodore was sitting on the porch smoking his pipe. He looked at them both with his shrewd eyes and nodded once, as if confirming something to himself. "Good evening, sir," Owen said respectfully. "Thank you for allowing me to take Emma to the social. You treat her well?" Theodore asked bluntly. "Better than well if she will let me," Owen replied without hesitation. Theodore grunted his approval. "Then I expect to see you around here regularly, right?" "Yes, sir," Owen agreed, grinning. After Owen left, Emma helped her uncle close up the workshop for the night. Theodore worked in silence for a while before finally speaking. "Your aunt would have liked him," he said gruffly. Emma felt tears spring to her eyes at the unexpected mention of the aunt she had never met, who had died long before Emma came to Texas. Theodore rarely spoke of his late wife, and Emma understood it was his way of giving Owen his highest approval. "I like him too," Emma admitted softly. "Good," Theodore said. "You deserve happiness, girl. Do not let anyone tell you different." The next weeks fell into a new rhythm. Emma continued her work at the tannery, but now there were bright spots to look forward to. Owen came by whenever his work at the ranch allowed, sometimes just for a few minutes to say hello, other times staying for supper and talking with Theodore about cattle and leather and the state of affairs in Texas. On Sundays, he would take Emma to church and then for walks or picnics, always treating her with a respect and affection that made her fall more deeply in love with him each day. The town's reaction to their courtship was mixed. Some people, like Reverend Collins and a few of the older ranchers who appreciated good work regardless of who did it, accepted their relationship with grace. Others, particularly the social elite like the Halsteads, made their disapproval clear through cutting remarks and deliberate snubs. Owen lost some business from the ranch when a few of the wealthy landowners made it known they would not deal with anyone who associated with the tanner's niece. But he took it in stride, finding work with other ranches who cared more about skill than social politics. One hot afternoon in August, Emma was working in the yard when she heard shouting from the street. She looked up to see a group of young men, sons of prominent families, gathered near the gate. One of them was throwing rocks toward the tannery, and Emma's stomach sank as she recognized them as friends of Margaret Halstead's brother. "Hey, Tanner girl," one of them called out, his words slightly slurred with alcohol. "You stink up the whole town, you know that." Emma considered retreating into the workshop, but something in her refused to run. She set down her tools and walked toward the gate, her chin held high despite her racing heart. "You have a problem with my work. You take it up with all the ranchers who depend on it," she said evenly. "Oh, she talks back," another one laughed. "Thinks she is somebody important." "I think I am someone doing an honest job," Emma replied, which is more than I can say for boys who spend their afternoons drunk and harassing women. One of them, a tall boy named Robert Halstead, who Emma recognized as Margaret's brother, stepped forward with an ugly expression on his face. You have got some nerve talking to us like that. Maybe someone needs to teach you your place. And maybe someone needs to teach you some manners, came Owen's voice from behind the group, cold and hard in a way Emma had never heard before. The boys turned to find Owen standing there, his hand resting casually on the gun at his hip. He was not making any threatening moves, but there was something in his stance that spoke of a man who knew how to handle himself and would not hesitate to do so if pushed. "This is none of your business, Wright," Robert said, but his bravado had faltered. "Anything involving Emma is my business," Owen said flatly. "Now I suggest you boys head on home before you do something you will regret." "You defending this," Robert struggled for words, "this smelly Tanner girl over your own kind." "My kind," Owen said, his voice dropping even lower, "are people who work hard and treat others with respect. Emma is worth 10 of you on your best day, Halstead. Now get out of here before I lose my patience." The boys looked at each other uncertainly, clearly not expecting this confrontation. Finally, Robert spat on the ground and turned away, his friends following. "You will regret this, Wright. My father will make sure of it." "Let him try," Owen called after them when they were gone. Owen immediately turned to Emma, his hard expression melting into concern. "Are you all right? Did they hurt you?" "I am fine," Emma said, though her hands were shaking slightly. "They were just being foolish." "They were being cruel," Owen corrected. He pulled her into his arms, and Emma let herself lean into his strength for a moment. "Emma, I am sorry. This is my fault. If I had not been courting you so openly, they would not have targeted you like this." "No," Emma said firmly, pulling back to look at him. "Do not apologize for treating me with respect and affection. You have done nothing wrong, Owen. They are the ones who should be ashamed." "Still," Owen said, his jaw tight, "I do not like seeing you hurt." "I am not hurt," Emma assured him. "I have dealt with worse than a few drunk boys throwing insults, but the incident seemed to crystallize something in Owen." That evening he asked Theodore if he could speak with him privately, and the two men disappeared into the workshop for nearly an hour. When they emerged, Theodore looked thoughtful and Owen looked determined. "Emma," Owen said, taking her hands in his, "we need to talk." They walked to their favorite spot by the creek as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Owen was quiet for a long moment, seeming to gather his thoughts. "Emma, I love you," he said finally, turning to face her. "I know it has only been a few months, but I am as certain of this as I have ever been of anything in my life. You are strong and brave and kind, and every day I spend with you just makes me more sure that I want to spend all my days with you." Emma's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "Owen, I love you too, so much." "Then marry me," Owen said, dropping to one knee right there by the creek. "I know I do not have much to offer. I am just a ranch foreman with a small savings and a lot of dreams. But I promise you I will work every day for the rest of my life to make you happy and give you the life you deserve. Marry me, Emma. Be my wife." Emma felt tears streaming down her face, happy tears for the first time in longer than she could remember. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, Owen, I will marry you." Owen stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around before setting her down and kissing her with a passion that made her dizzy. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and grinning like fools, Emma noticed he was pulling something from his pocket. "I know it is not much," Owen said, showing her a simple silver band with a small blue stone set in it. "But I wanted you to have a ring. The stone is turquoise from out west. It reminded me of your eyes." Emma looked at the ring, simple and beautiful and so perfectly suited to her that she felt her throat tighten with emotion. "It is perfect, Owen. Absolutely perfect." He slipped it onto her finger, and Emma held up her hand to watch it catch the last rays of sunlight. She was engaged. She was going to marry Owen Wright, the man who had seen past the smell and the stains and the town's disapproval to the person she truly was underneath. It felt like a dream, but the solid weight of the ring on her finger and the warmth of Owen's hand in hers assured her it was beautifully, wonderfully real. They told Theodore that evening, and the old man actually smiled, a rare sight that made Emma's heart swell with happiness. "About time," was all he said, but he shook Owen's hand firmly and pulled Emma into a brief but heartfelt embrace. The wedding was planned for October, after the fall cattle drive when Owen would have a brief respite from his duties at the ranch. They decided to have a simple ceremony at the church with just close friends and family, knowing that a large affair would only invite more conflict with the town's social elite. The announcement of their engagement caused exactly the stir Emma had expected. Margaret Halstead made sure everyone knew her opinion on the matter, declaring it a disgrace that a decent cowboy would lower himself to marry a tanner's niece. Several of the ranch owners who employed Owen made it clear they were not pleased, and one even went so far as to suggest that Owen find employment elsewhere if he was going to persist in this unsuitable match. Owen's response was to quit his position at the Double R Ranch and take a job with a smaller operation run by an older rancher named Samuel Cooper, who had known Theodore for years and respected both his work and his niece. The pay was slightly less, but Cooper treated his workers fairly and told Owen that any man who judged a woman by her work rather than her character was not worth knowing anyway. Emma continued working at the tannery through the summer and into fall, determined to help her uncle as much as possible before she married and moved to the small house Owen was renting closer to the Cooper Ranch. The work was as grueling as ever, but now she had something to look forward to beyond just survival. She would catch herself smiling as she worked, thinking about Owen and their future together, about the home they would build and the life they would share. One evening in late September, Emma was finishing up for the day when a well-dressed woman she did not recognize came to the gate. The woman was perhaps 40, elegantly dressed but with a kind face that immediately set Emma at ease. "Miss Anderson?" the woman asked. "Yes, madam," Emma replied, wiping her hands on her apron. "My name is Catherine Wright," the woman said. "I am Owen's mother." Emma felt her eyes widen in shock. "But Owen said he told me you had passed when he was young." Catherine smiled sadly. "I am not Owen's birth mother. I am his stepmother. Though I came into his life so late, he has never really thought of me that way. His father remarried a year before he died, and I was that unfortunate bride. Owen had already left home by then, seeking his fortune out west, and we never had the chance to truly know each other." "Oh," Emma said, trying to process this information. "Does Owen know you are here?" "No," Catherine admitted. "I only recently learned of his whereabouts and his engagement. I came to Jefferson hoping to reconnect with him before he starts his own family." She paused, looking at Emma with searching eyes. "I also came because I heard the circumstances of your courtship, and I wanted to meet the woman who captured my stepson's heart." Emma gestured toward the workshop. "Would you like to come in? I should warn you, the smell is quite strong." "I do not mind," Catherine said, and proved it by following Emma inside without the slightest hesitation. They found Theodore working late on a saddle commission, and after brief introductions, Catherine asked if she might speak with Emma privately. They walked to the small parlor in the house attached to the tannery, a room Emma rarely used since she spent most of her time working. "Miss Anderson, Emma," Catherine began once they were settled. "I must confess that when I first heard about Owen's engagement to a tanner's niece, I was concerned. Not because of the work itself, you understand, but because I know how cruel society can be to those who do not fit their narrow definitions of respectability." Emma nodded, unsure where this conversation was headed. "But then I made inquiries," Catherine continued. "I spoke with Reverend Collins and several others in town. I learned about how you came to be here, about your parents' death and your uncle's kindness in taking you in. I learned about the work you do, the skill and dedication it requires. And I learned about how the town has treated you, the way you have been shunned and avoided despite doing nothing wrong except honest labor." "Yes, madam," Emma said quietly. "That has been my experience." Catherine reached across and took Emma's hand. "Then I want you to know that you have my full support and blessing. Owen is a good man, and he deserves a strong woman who knows the value of hard work and perseverance. From what I can see, that is exactly what he has found in you." Emma felt tears well up in her eyes. "Thank you. That means more than you know. I also want you to know," Catherine continued, "that you are not alone in this. I have some means of my own from my first marriage, and I have connections in Texas society. If you and Owen will allow it, I would like to help smooth the way for you both. Not because you need rescuing, but because families should support each other, and I would very much like to be part of Owen's family again, if he will have me." Emma squeezed Catherine's hand. "I think Owen will be very happy to know you are here. He has so few connections to his past, to his parents. Having you in his life would mean everything to him." When Owen arrived later that evening to take Emma for a walk, he was stunned to find Catherine waiting in the parlor. The reunion was emotional, with Owen initially reserved and uncertain before Catherine's genuine warmth broke through his defenses. They talked for hours, Catherine filling in details about his father's last years, and Owen sharing stories of his life out west. By the end of the evening, there were tears and laughter in equal measure, and Emma felt her heart swell with happiness at seeing Owen reconnect with this piece of his history. Catherine stayed in Jefferson for the remaining weeks before the wedding, taking a room at the hotel and making it her mission to improve Emma's standing in town. She attended church services and made a point of sitting with Emma, introducing herself as Owen's mother and making it clear that she fully supported the marriage. She held a tea at the hotel and invited several of the town's influential women, subtly but firmly redirecting any attempts to gossip about Emma's work by praising her dedication and skill. Not everyone was swayed by Catherine's efforts, but enough people began to reconsider their harsh judgments that Emma noticed a definite shift in how she was treated. Shopkeepers became more polite, and a few women even went out of their way to speak kindly to her. It was not universal acceptance, but it was enough to make daily life considerably easier. The wedding day arrived with perfect autumn weather, the oppressive heat of summer finally broken by cooler temperatures and clear blue skies. Emma wore a simple white dress that Catherine had helped her make, with lace at the collar and cuffs that transformed it from plain to beautiful. Her hair was arranged in soft curls, and Catherine had loaned her a strand of pearls that had belonged to her grandmother. Standing in front of the church mirror, Emma barely recognized herself. She looked happy, she realized with some surprise. Not just content or resigned, but genuinely happy in a way she had not been since before her parents died. "You look beautiful, child," Theodore said gruffly from the doorway, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Thank you, Uncle," Emma said, turning to embrace him. "For everything. For taking me in, for teaching me, for giving me a home when I had nothing." "You gave this old man purpose again," Theodore replied. "You are like the daughter I never had. I am proud of you, Emma, proud of your strength and your courage. Your parents would be too." Emma had to dab carefully at her eyes to avoid ruining the bit of color Catherine had helped her apply to her cheeks. Then it was time, and Theodore was offering his arm to walk her down the aisle. The church was not full, but there were more people than Emma had expected. Samuel Cooper and his wife were there, along with several of Owen's fellow ranch hands. Catherine sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Reverend Collins and his wife smiled warmly at her. And there, at the end of the aisle, was Owen. He was dressed in his best clothes, his hair neatly combed, his eyes locked on Emma with such love and devotion that she felt her breath catch. This was real. This strong, kind, wonderful man loved her and wanted to spend his life with her, and she loved him with every fiber of her being. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. They exchanged vows in clear voices, promising to love and honor each other through all the challenges life might bring. When Reverend Collins pronounced them husband and wife, and told Owen he could kiss his bride, the kiss was sweet and full of promise for all the years to come. The reception was held in the churchyard, with food provided by Catherine and several of the church ladies who had come around to supporting the match. There was music and laughter, and for once, Emma felt like she was part of the community rather than someone to be avoided. Owen never left her side except to dance with his stepmother, and even then, he kept looking back at Emma as if to assure himself she was still there, that this was all real. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the churchyard, Owen pulled Emma aside to their favorite spot by the creek. They stood together watching the water flow past, Emma leaning back against Owen's chest with his arms wrapped around her. "Happy?" Owen asked softly, his breath warm against her ear. "More than I thought possible," Emma replied honestly. "Owen, you have given me everything, a future, hope, love. I do not know how I got so lucky." "I am the lucky one," Owen insisted. "Emma, from the moment I met you, I knew you were special. The way you carried yourself with such quiet strength, the way you refused to apologize for doing honest work, the way you faced down the town's judgment with your head held high. You are the bravest person I know, and I am honored that you chose me." Emma turned in his arms to face him. "I chose you because you saw me, really saw me, when everyone else just saw the work I did. You looked past the smell and the stains and the town's disapproval and saw the person I am inside. That is a gift beyond measure, Owen." They kissed as the sun set, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had chosen love over social approval and built something real and lasting from that choice. The small house Owen had rented was a few miles from the Cooper Ranch, close enough that he could easily get to work but far enough to give them privacy. It was nothing fancy, just 2 rooms and a kitchen, but Catherine had helped Emma furnish it with some basic necessities, and Emma had made curtains and other small touches that transformed it into a home. Their first months of marriage were filled with the joy of discovering each other, of building a life together. Emma continued to help Theodore at the tannery a few days a week, though now she had her own home to care for as well. Owen worked long hours at the ranch, but he always came home to Emma with stories of his day and genuine interest in hers. Catherine stayed in Jefferson for a few months after the wedding, growing close to both Emma and Owen. She shared stories of Owen's father that helped him understand the man better, and she offered Emma guidance on navigating the social complexities of small-town life. When she finally left to return to her own home in Dallas, it was with promises to visit regularly and an open invitation for them to come stay with her anytime. The town's attitude toward Emma continued to slowly shift. It helped that Owen was well respected among the ranching community, and his obvious devotion to Emma made people reconsider their harsh judgments. It also helped that Emma never apologized for her work or tried to hide it, continuing to take pride in the quality leather goods that came from her and her uncle's combined efforts. Margaret Halstead remained determinedly disapproving, but her influence waned when she made the mistake of insulting Emma in front of Samuel Cooper's wife, a formidable woman who had no patience for snobbery. After being thoroughly dressed down by one of the most respected women in the county, Margaret learned to keep her opinions to herself, at least in public. By the time spring arrived, Emma had settled into a contentment she had never imagined possible. She had a husband who loved her, work that gave her purpose, and a growing acceptance in the community. But the greatest joy came in May when she realized her monthly courses had stopped and morning sickness had begun. She told Owen one evening after supper, unable to keep the news to herself any longer. His reaction was everything she could have hoped for and more. He picked her up and spun her around despite her laughing protests about the nausea, his face lit up with pure happiness. "A baby," he kept saying. "Emma, we are going to have a baby. In the fall, if I am calculating correctly," Emma confirmed. "October or November, I think." Owen immediately became overprotective, insisting she do less heavy work at the tannery and fussing over her health constantly. Emma found it endearing even when it was a bit excessive, understanding that it came from a place of deep love and care. Theodore took the news with his typical gruff approval, immediately beginning work on a beautiful cradle carved from oak. Catherine came for a visit and cried happy tears, already planning a trip for after the baby was born. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer. Emma's body changed and grew, and she found herself marveling at the life taking shape inside her. Owen would lay his hand on her belly at night and talk to their child, telling stories and making promises about the future they would build together. In late October, as the leaves were turning gold and the air held the first real chill of autumn, Emma's labor began. It was long and difficult, lasting nearly a full day, with Owen pacing anxiously in the kitchen while the midwife and the doctor attended Emma. When the baby finally arrived in the early hours of the morning, it was a boy, healthy and strong with an impressive set of lungs. "A son," the midwife said, placing the cleaned and swaddled baby in Emma's arms. "Congratulations, Mrs. Wright." Emma looked down at her son's tiny, perfect face and felt a love so overwhelming it brought tears to her eyes. When Owen was finally allowed into the room, he approached slowly, almost reverently, his eyes wide with wonder. "Emma," he whispered. "Oh, Emma, he is perfect." "Would you like to hold him?" Emma asked. Owen took the baby with careful hands, looking down at his son with an expression of such profound love and joy that Emma felt her own heart swell in response. "Hello, little one," Owen said softly. "I am your father. And I promise you, I am going to do everything in my power to give you a good life, to teach you to be strong and kind, and to value people for who they are, not what they do or where they come from." "What should we name him?" Emma asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy, but had never settled on anything definite. Now, looking at their son, Owen smiled. "James," he said. "After my father. James Theodore Wright, if your uncle will allow us to honor him as well." "I think Uncle Theodore would like that very much," Emma said warmly. When Theodore met his namesake later that day, the old man actually cried, holding the baby with surprising gentleness and murmuring words in German that Emma did not understand, but could tell were blessings. Catherine arrived a week later and stayed for a month, helping Emma adjust to motherhood, and generally being the grandmother that little James would never have otherwise. She doted on the baby and fussed over Emma, making sure she rested enough and ate well to keep up her strength for nursing. The town welcomed the new addition with surprising warmth. Even people who had previously been cool toward Emma found themselves softening at the sight of the young family. It was hard to maintain prejudice in the face of a new baby and parents so obviously devoted to each other and their child. As winter set in, Emma found herself reflecting on how much her life had changed in the past year and a half. She had gone from being the shunned tanner's niece, resigned to a life of isolation and loneliness, to being a wife and mother with a loving husband and a future bright with possibility. And it had all started with a cowboy who had seen past the smell and the stains to the person underneath, who had said that true work deserved true devotion, and had lived that belief every single day since. "What are you thinking about?" Owen asked one evening as they sat together by the fire, James sleeping peacefully in his cradle nearby. "You," Emma said honestly. "About how you changed my life completely, about how lucky I am." "We are both lucky," Owen corrected, pulling her close. "Emma, you gave me a family, a home, a purpose beyond just working and surviving. You gave me love and a future I never dreamed possible. I thank God every day that I needed a saddle repaired and that I walked into your uncle's tannery that afternoon." "So do I," Emma whispered, turning to kiss him softly. "So do I." The years that followed were full and rich. Emma continued to help Theodore at the tannery when she could, though her primary focus became her growing family. A daughter arrived 2 years after James, a sweet-tempered child they named Catherine after Owen's stepmother. Then another son 3 years later, Theodore Jr., called Teddy to distinguish him from his great-uncle. Owen advanced in his career, eventually becoming a full partner with Samuel Cooper in the ranch operation. The work was demanding but rewarding, and Owen's reputation for fairness and skill grew throughout the region. He made sure that his children understood the value of all honest work, often taking them to visit their great-uncle's tannery and explaining how the leather goods they used every day came to be. Theodore lived to see all 3 of his great-niece's children born, passing peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73 when Emma was 30 years old. His death hit Emma hard, but she took comfort in knowing that he had died happy, surrounded by family and with his skills passed on to a new generation. The tannery was sold to a young man from Dallas who had apprenticed with Theodore in his final years, ensuring that the business would continue. Catherine Wright remained a constant presence in their lives, visiting several times a year and hosting them at her home in Dallas during the holidays. She lived to see James married at 22 to a schoolteacher from a neighboring county, and she held her first great-grandchild before passing away quietly at 71, content in the knowledge that Owen had found the family and happiness he deserved. As Emma and Owen grew older, their love only deepened. They weathered challenges together, including a particularly brutal drought that threatened the ranch's survival and a terrible influenza outbreak that swept through Jefferson when they were in their 40s. But through it all, they had each other, and that foundation of mutual respect and devotion that had been there from the beginning never wavered. Their children grew into good, strong adults who carried the values Emma and Owen had instilled in them. James became a rancher like his father, taking over the Cooper Ranch when Samuel retired. Catherine became a teacher, passionate about education and helping children learn. Teddy surprised everyone by becoming a lawyer, moving to Austin but returning home often to visit his aging parents. When Emma was 55 and Owen 57, they decided to build a new house on a piece of land they had purchased years earlier, a beautiful spot with views of the rolling Texas hills and a creek running through the property. It was meant to be their retirement home, a place where they could slow down and enjoy the fruits of decades of hard work. They were sitting on the porch of that new house one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, when Emma reached over and took Owen's hand. "Do you remember the day we met?" she asked. "Every detail," Owen replied. "You were scraping a hide in the yard, looking exhausted and strong and beautiful all at once. I knew right then that there was something special about you." "I thought you were crazy for not being disgusted by me," Emma admitted with a laugh. "I was never disgusted," Owen said firmly. "I was impressed. I had done that work, Emma. I knew how hard it was. Seeing you doing it with such dedication and skill, that told me everything I needed to know about your character. You said that true work deserves true devotion," Emma remembered. "That was the day at the church social when Margaret tried to belittle what I did." "And I meant it," Owen said. "I still mean it. Emma, you taught me so much about courage and perseverance. Watching you face down the town's judgment with your head held high, refusing to apologize for doing honest work, that showed me what real strength looks like." "We taught each other," Emma said softly. "You taught me that I deserved love and respect, that my worth was not defined by other people's small-minded prejudices. You gave me hope when I had none, Owen. You gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams. And you gave me a home, a family, a reason to be a better man," Owen replied. "Emma Anderson Wright, you are the best thing that ever happened to me, and I would make the same choice 1,000 times over." They sat in comfortable silence as the last light faded from the sky. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful and lasting from that chance meeting so many years ago. Around them, the sounds of the Texas evening rose up, crickets chirping and cattle lowing in the distance, the wind rustling through the grass. Inside the house, they could hear their granddaughter laughing at something James had said during the family supper that had brought everyone together this evening. Emma smiled at the sound, thinking about how full her life had become, how blessed she was to have not just Owen but this entire family they had created together. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not needed that saddle repair?" Emma asked suddenly. Owen considered for a moment, then shook his head. "No, I believe we were meant to find each other, Emma. Maybe not that exact day in that exact way, but somehow, somewhere. Some things are just destined." "I used to not believe in destiny," Emma admitted. "When my parents died, when I found myself alone and doing work that made me a social pariah, I thought the universe was cruel and random." "And now?" Owen asked. "Now I think maybe you are right," Emma said. "Maybe we were meant to find each other. Maybe all the hardship I went through was preparing me to appreciate what we have, to never take it for granted." Owen squeezed her hand. "I have never taken you for granted, Emma, not for a single day of our marriage." "I know," Emma said. "That is part of what makes you so special, Owen. You have always seen me, truly seen me, and valued what you saw." As the evening deepened into night, they finally went inside to join their family. The house was full of noise and laughter, grandchildren running around and adult children debating politics and gossiping about neighbors. Emma moved through it all with a contented heart, stopping to kiss a grandchild's head here, to help serve dessert there, always aware of Owen's presence nearby, his eyes finding hers across the room and sharing a private smile that spoke of decades of love and understanding. Later, after everyone had gone home or to bed in the guest rooms, Emma and Owen lay together in their bed, the window open to let in the cool night air. Owen's arm was around Emma, her head resting on his shoulder in the position they had slept in for over 30 years. "Owen," Emma said softly into the darkness. "Yes, love, thank you for everything, for seeing past what everyone else saw, for loving me when I thought I was unlovable, for giving me this beautiful life." Owen pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Thank you for taking a chance on a dusty cowboy who showed up needing a saddle repair. Thank you for being brave enough to love me back despite what it might cost you. Thank you for James and Catherine and Teddy, for this family, for every single day of happiness you have given me. I love you, Emma whispered. I love you too, Owen replied. Always have, always will. They drifted off to sleep like that, two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed, who had built a life of love and purpose from the foundation of mutual respect and devotion. Outside, the Texas night continued around them. The same stars that had shone on that first afternoon when a cowboy walked into a tannery and saw not a social pariah, but a woman of strength and character worth cherishing. The story of Emma Anderson and Owen Wright became something of a legend in Jefferson over the years. People would tell their children and grandchildren about the tanner's niece who was avoided for her work, until a cowboy came along and said that true work deserves true devotion, proving through his actions that love and respect matter more than social standing or the prejudices of small minds. It became a story about looking past surface judgments to see the real person underneath, about having the courage to follow your heart even when society says you should not, about the power of true love to overcome any obstacle. Emma and Owen lived to see their golden anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. The party was held at the house they had built, with half the county showing up to celebrate a marriage that had become a testament to the best of what love could be. Even some of the people who had been most opposed to their union in the beginning came, older now and wiser, ready to admit they had been wrong in their judgment all those years ago. Margaret Halstead, now an elderly widow who had buried 2 husbands and raised 3 ungrateful children, came to the party and actually apologized to Emma for how she had treated her in their youth. Emma graciously accepted the apology, having long ago let go of any bitterness she might have felt. Life was too short and too precious to waste on old grudges. As Emma stood next to Owen that day, his hand warm in hers as it had been for 50 years, she looked around at all the faces of people she loved and who loved her in return. She thought about the scared, lonely girl she had been at 18, resigned to a life of isolation and hard work with no hope for anything more. She thought about the man who had walked into her life and changed everything with his simple declaration that her work deserved respect and devotion. "What are you thinking, my love?" Owen asked, his voice not as strong as it once was but still warm with affection. "I am thinking that I am the luckiest woman alive," Emma replied honestly. "I am thinking that every moment of hardship, every tear I cried, every lonely night I endured, was worth it because it led me to you and to this life we built together." "No regrets?" Owen asked with a slight smile. "Not a single one," Emma said firmly. "You, Owen Wright, are the best decision I ever made. Saying yes to you was saying yes to everything good in my life." "And you," Owen said, raising her hand to his lips and kissing it gently, "are my heart, my home, my everything. I could not have asked for a better partner in life, Emma. You made every day an adventure, every challenge conquerable, every joy sweeter just by being by my side." They kissed then, as they had thousands of times before, surrounded by the cheers and applause of their family and friends. It was a kiss that spoke of decades of love, of challenges overcome and joys shared, of a partnership built on mutual respect and devotion that had only grown stronger with time. As the party continued around them, Emma rested her head on Owen's shoulder and watched their grandchildren play, secure in the knowledge that the legacy they were leaving was one of love conquering prejudice, of character mattering more than circumstance, of 2 people who had found each other and held on tight through everything life could throw at them. Years later, when Emma passed away peacefully at the age of 78 with Owen holding her hand, the entire county mourned. Owen followed her just 6 months later, unable or unwilling to face a world without his beloved wife by his side. They were buried together in the Jefferson Cemetery under a simple headstone that read, Emma Anderson Wright and Owen Samuel Wright, beloved parents and grandparents, proof that true love knows no boundaries. Their children ensured that the story of their parents' courtship and marriage was passed down through the generations, a reminder that the best love stories are not about perfection, but about seeing past surface judgments to the real person underneath, about having the courage to stand by your convictions even when it costs you, about believing that honest work of any kind deserves respect and devotion. The tannery that had once been Theodore's was eventually torn down to make way for modern development, but a plaque was placed on the site commemorating the business and the people who had worked there with skill and dedication. Emma would have been proud of that recognition, Owen's children thought, proud that the work she had once been shunned for was finally being acknowledged as the valuable contribution to the community it had always been. In the house that Emma and Owen had built for their retirement, now occupied by their son James and his family, a framed photograph hung in the place of honor above the fireplace. It showed Emma and Owen on their wedding day, young and hopeful and so clearly in love that it made everyone who saw it smile. Beneath it was a small brass plate with an inscription that summed up their entire story in just a few words. True work deserves true devotion. True love conquers all. And so the story ended as all the best stories do, with love triumphant and a legacy that lived on in the hearts and minds of everyone who had been touched by it. Emma Anderson had been avoided for her work, judged and shunned by a society that valued appearances over character. But Owen Wright had looked past all of that and seen the strong, capable, beautiful woman underneath. He had declared that true work deserves true devotion, and he had proven it every day for over 50 years, creating in the process a love story that inspired generations, and showed that the best things in life come not from following society's rules, but from following your heart. Their grandchildren and great-grandchildren grew up knowing that they came from people who had faced adversity with courage, who had built something beautiful from difficult circumstances, who had loved each other with a devotion that never wavered. They carried that legacy forward into their own lives, remembering that work of any kind deserves respect if it is done with dedication and skill, that people should be judged by their character rather than their circumstances, and that true love, the kind that sees and values the real person underneath all the surface details, is worth fighting for no matter what obstacles stand in the way. The town of Jefferson, Texas, continued to grow and change over the decades, but the story of Emma and Owen remained a constant, a touchstone that reminded people of their better natures and the values that truly mattered. In a world that too often valued wealth and status over character and hard work, their story stood as a testament to the enduring power of love based on mutual respect and genuine devotion. And though Emma and Owen were gone, their love lived on in the family they had created, in the values they had instilled, in the story that continued to be told whenever someone needed reminding that the most important things in life are not things at all but the connections we make with other people, the love we give and receive, the courage we show in the face of adversity, and the legacy we leave behind in the hearts of those who come after us. In the end, that was the true measure of their lives, not the challenges they had faced or the prejudices they had overcome, but the love they had built and the family they had created, and the example they had set for what it meant to live with integrity and devotion. Emma Anderson Wright and Owen Samuel Wright had taken the hand they were dealt and played it with courage and grace, creating in the process a love story for the ages and a legacy that would never be forgotten. Their story was complete, their lives fully lived, their love eternal. And in the hearts of everyone who had known them or heard their story, they lived on as proof that true love really does conquer all, that honest work truly does deserve respect and devotion, and that the courage to see past society's prejudices to the real person underneath is always, always worth it in the end.